Let's talk to a couple of politicians that on general terms don't upset me. The Labor member for Bean, David Smith. G'day, David.
Morning, Stephen.
And ACT Liberal Senator and Assistant Minister for Finance, Charities and Electoral Matters, Zed Seselja. G'day, Zed.
G'day, Stephen. How are you?
Good. I almost forgot who you were there for a moment.
Yeah,
moving right along.
Possible.
No, I know. I keep saying he's the man with the second coolest name in federal politics after Matthias Cormann, of course. There's something that I am in two minds about. Independent MP Helen Haines has put forward a bill for an Australian Federal Integrity Commission. Now, I'll start with you, David, because there's been more chatter out of your side about this recently. How do we stop this from becoming nothing more than a political star chamber like the New South Wales ICAC?
Well, Stephen, I think there's demand from right across the country. So I think we had the Law Council of Australia actually coming out saying that it's time for a Federal Integrity Commission. I think the starting point, obviously, is for 3 years the government has been talking about the need for an Integrity Commission too. Let's see the exposure draft of legislation for the body that they're proposing so that we can actually start to get to ensure that we actually have a functional, independent and transparent Integrity Commission. I think, look, there's growing concern across the community about integrity in government. It's not just at a federal level; it's at state and territory levels as well. And I think it's time we got on and ensured that we had that oversight.
Zed, where is the evidence that there is any wholesale corruption at a federal level? I mean, and why do we need an added level of bureaucracy to handle it when we see things like Senate estimates seem to uncover the kind of stuff we're worried about anyway?
Well, I guess the answer to the first question is I don't think there is any evidence of wholesale corruption. I think from time to time we do see elements of it at any level of government. It can creep in, so it's something that we've always got to be wary of and make sure that there are appropriate accountabilities. So to answer your first question where you said how do you avoid it being a sort of star chamber, I mean, that's not the model the government's pursuing, and we're pursuing, I think, a very responsible model. We will be putting out that exposure draft, and we've already started with funding in the budget for ACLI, which already has this integrity role, expanding it to a number of other agencies. But I wouldn't want to see a replication of the ICAC model. I think that has had a number of failings. I think what you want to do is have serious accountability, investigative powers for the right agency so that where there is corruption, they can get to the bottom of it, and then they can refer it to for prosecution to the courts, which is, I think, the appropriate place, rather than, I think, what you're referring to, where, you see people's private lives being dragged through the mud and all these sort of things, but not actually necessarily evidence of corruption, although the stain of corruption can hang around for a long time once people have been called corrupt, even if there is no evidence whatsoever.
Well, David, that's a classic example. I mean, look at former New South Wales Police Minister Michael Gallagher, who had his political career trashed, his reputation destroyed, only for 2 years later to find out, oh, well, there's actually nothing here. You didn't do anything wrong. Sorry, too late, mate, your career's over. Why don't we just give some money to the Australian Federal Police and say, set up a corruption task force?
Well, I think, Stephen, we've got challenges with our existing models. There's challenges already in terms of funding for the National Audit Office. There's concerns about whether ACLI has enough funding, which at least it's good to see some budget funding coming through. But we shouldn't be if you're going to public life, you shouldn't be afraid of ensuring that they're being answerable potentially to national integrity bodies. It's something that effectively all our respected sort of legal bodies across the country support. So it's something we shouldn't be afraid of. And look, in terms of concerns, I mean, our corporate watchdog just in the last 2 weeks has had pretty significant concerns raised about the way funds have been used in relation to board members. We've got the Australian Post board effectively authorising the handing out of cardio watches to executives. There's actually a lot more to be seen than you might think.
Yeah, but David, these things are being exposed without an added level of bureaucracy, which is what a federal ICAC or Federal Integrity Commission will be.
but the problem is in many cases, Stephen, is that it's taking years to uncover these issues. And with the audit office at the moment, with the state of funding, and it's effectively there are many inquiries that they can't pursue. So look, I don't. As I said, there are good reasons to be careful about the way that the model proceeds. But at the same time, if we're going into public life, we owe it to the public to ensure that there's independent and transparent sort of oversight of the work that people do.
All right, David, let's talk about a positive. The War Memorial redevelopment, $500 million for, I think, our most important cultural icon. You're on the Public Works Committee. I think this is interesting that tenderers are going to need to involve veterans or their families if they want to win contracts. I think that's a brilliant idea.
Oh, Stephen, yeah, I think it's a clever idea, and I think what it actually shows you too is if when we use government money for big public works projects, we should think about how we might be able to achieve other public goods with it. And the idea, I think, of backing in veterans' jobs as part of a development such as that one is actually is a really, really positive idea.
Zed, I think you'd agree that it is a positive, but probably difficult to achieve in practical terms, perhaps.
Well, look, there obviously are some challenges in terms of exactly how you prescribe that, but it's been made very clear as part of that tender process that that's the expectation, and so anyone bidding will have to demonstrate how they deliver jobs for veterans, which I think is a great thing. I mean, this is a really important project for the nation. It's a great project for Canberra, not just the jobs in construction, but, the value will go well beyond that in terms of, I think, tourism. For veterans, I was there with a friend of mine who was a veteran of both Afghanistan and Iraq with his family, and we had a tour of the War Memorial recently. And, for him to be able to go there and, sign, I think there's a wall they can sign for some of those more recent veterans, was very, very special. But we did note that at the moment, the War Memorial, as amazing a place it is those veterans of recent conflicts are not properly honoured, and that is what this is about. So adding to that we'll have more veterans employed as part of it, I think, is just another benefit of what is an amazing project.
David, there has been some criticism of this redevelopment and particularly the demolition of Anzac Hall and the rebuilding of it. But when you look at I think is it 2% of the exhibits available are on display at any one time. We obviously need more room, don't we?
So I think it's pretty clear that there's a need for more room. And as said, it's particularly important so that we're able to honour the contribution of veterans of recent conflicts and peacekeeping operations. Look, where the project's at is still before Public Works. We're still waiting for a few heritage and parliamentary approval processes. But I think there is a key, and it's pretty clear that we need to ensure that we can continue to tell all the stories of our veterans in different conflicts.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, good to speak to you this morning. We'll catch up next week.
Thanks very much, guys.
That's David Smith, the member for Bean, and ACT Liberal Senator Zed Seselja. It is 18.5.